Greetings, everyone, and welcome to part 2 of the Governor's Office Native American Heritage Month Brown Bag Series covering Native representation in politics, getting your name on the ballot. My name is Christina Snyder, and I'm a member of the Dry Creek Rancheria Band of Pomo Indians and the Tribal Advisor to Governor Gavin Newsom. Before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joining you from the original homelands of the Patwin peoples. The goal of this Brown Bag Series is to increase Native representation in state leadership by demystifying the processes of getting appointed to leadership and advisory positions within the Newsom administration, as well as into elected positions. In part 1, we explored the appointments process, and today in part 2, we'll be walking through the process of getting your name on the ballot and hearing from some Native elected officials about their path to state and local offices. The governor firmly believes that California is stronger when all Californians are visible, heard, and welcomed at all levels of policymaking, and we hope that these sessions can help encourage that for Native populations throughout the state. I'm now going to briefly walk through some of the logistics for today's meeting. First, we are recording today's presentation. We'll be posting this to the Tribal Advisor website at tribalaffairs.ca.gov and the Tribal Advisor Facebook page. You've all been muted and your cameras have been disabled. I ask that you remain muted until we get to the comments and questions portion of today's presentation, though our moderator may call for questions and comments during her presentation. Once we get to the comments and questions portion of today's presentation, you can ask questions by using the raise hand function. And if you're using the Zoom app, you can do it using the app controls, but you can also use Alt-Y in Windows or Option-Y on Mac to raise or lower your hand. If you have difficulty, you can also directly message me that you have a question and we will call on you. If you've called in, we'll first go through raised hands for questions, but then open up the webinar for any dial-in questions. And at that point, you can unmute your line using *6. Again, thank you for joining us today, and I'll now turn it over to Chrissy Castro, co-founder of Advanced Native Political Leadership and the California Native Vote Project, to begin our presentation.
Thank you, Christina. Hello, everyone. I'm Chrissy Castro. I'm Nakai Dene, born for Hanagani, or Mexican clan born for the one who walks around clan. I'm Navajo and Chicana, and as Christina shared, I co-founded a few organizations looking to build power on behalf of Native peoples here in California, the California Native Vote Project, nationally, Advanced Native Political Leadership, and also very recently, the Native Power Pack in California. All of these efforts are based in grassroots community organizing with the intention of using all of the vehicles available to us, so C3, C4, political action committees, to protect tribal sovereignty and improve policies and conditions for Native peoples. And I'm just going to share a few thoughts to frame the conversation before we introduce and hear from our Native elected officials, which we're so happy to have with us today. I first want to start with just recognizing that while I completely believe in electoral justice strategies, I'm very aware of how increasing Native political participation and representation can be challenging. We are working within systems that weren't necessarily made for us. We've been denied voting rights throughout the nation's history, and we're still working on equitable access to the ballot box today. Native communities are the most litigated communities in the Supreme Court cases concerning Voting Rights Act violations because of vote dilution, packing, splitting, and other attempts at lessening our political power. Yet, despite all of these obstacles, we see that Native peoples are uniting across the country to use voting and elections as a pathway to protect our rights. Just this last election, we are celebrating the highest number of Native representatives in Congress and historic turnouts in Arizona, Nevada, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and also in California. As far as our political representation is concerned, we experienced record-breaking numbers of Native candidates, both in 2018 and 2020. And in order for us to reach parity, we need to keep up that momentum. Here in California, I am aware of at least 5 Native elected officials representing 2 city council members, 1 county supervisor, 1 mayor, and the state legislator. And while those wins are phenomenal because there are so many barriers in front of our candidates, in order for us to gain parity, we actually need to really broaden that pathway to at least more than 50 representatives. In California, Native elected officials are represented at 0.03%, while we're 2% of the population. When Native peoples are elected, we know that we see improvements in policies, not only that are good for Native peoples, but that are good for all peoples. And it makes me so happy when we see Native peoples getting elected and taking our rightful place in leading and protecting the inheritance of these lands. I'm so grateful today to have the honor to facilitate this conversation with two Native elected leaders who are really setting the table for the future of Native representation in California. We're joined today by Assemblymember Ramos, the first California Native American to serve in the California State Assembly, elected in 2018 and was just reelected, and Supervisor Crandall from the Lake County Board of Supervisors and former chair of Robinson Rancheria Pomo. So thank you so much for joining us today. I feel very honored to be in this conversation. And we really wanted to start off with a point of just storytelling. You know, what was your journey toward deciding to run for office? And if you can talk to us a little bit about, the challenges and maybe how you overcame some of those challenges. And Assemblymember Ramos, if I can start with you, I would really love to hear about your story.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me? Well, thank you, and thank you for that. Thank you for all your hard work and working with Native American people to make sure that we continue to move forward to get people elected at all levels of government. I know you mentioned there's 5 elected here in the state of California, but we need a whole lot more to get engaged. And for me, growing up on the Samoa Indian Reservation, I grew up in a time where there was deep poverty. Now, many people see tribes and gaming and enterprises that are going on. But I grew up on the reservation when there was deep poverty. We were fighting for HUD homes. We were living out of mobile homes, dirt roads, those types of things. And it wasn't until later that we started to work with the surrounding local jurisdictions. I remember my grandmother's house was, there was a flood that wiped out the road to her house. And it stayed that way for close to 6 months, meaning that there was no electricity, no gas, no anything to her house. So the family, we had to bring food into their house for them for all that time. Meanwhile, fighting for funding from the Bureau of Indian Affairs for a temporary emergency fix for that. We ultimately got that, but it was for a temporary fix for that road that was washed out. And that temporary road that was washed out, that was fixed, still serves today, even in that temporary status. So we actually paved over it, compacted it, and continue to move forward. But that was a chance to see how the impacts and the voice of our Indian people, and how that voice really goes from the federal reservation, and people see it going to the state, to the federal government, meaning that the counties, the cities, the states, those jurisdictions around, a lot of times figure, well, that's not our problem, right? The reservation is on its own. Well, wait a minute. Once you sit on the County Board of Supervisors, which we have on San Bernardino County, the largest county in the nation, we know that there's resources that are available to all those within the county. That includes the Indian reservation and population. So growing up in that era and rising through our own political structure in the tribal government, I served as the Tribal Gaming Commissioner, chair of that. I served on the business committee. I served as the treasurer, and I ultimately served as the tribal chairman of the people of Santos Manuel, and learning a lot of those issues that were in front of us. Meanwhile, while all this was going on, we had to have protests. We lobbied at the state capitol and the federal government for the right to move forward in gaming. But gaming was a way for me to open up and get resources to still be a voice and advocate for all those issues that still plague our people today here in the state of California and the United States. When you look at education, you look at the suicide rates, you look at all those social ills that plagued our people back then, they still plague our people today. So we have to be a strong voice for that as we move forward. And then running, I ran for the San Bernardino Community College Board of Trustees in 2005 and won that position. and I served on the tribal council and on the community college board of trustees from 2005 to 2012. In 2012, I ran for the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors. And when I ran for the San Bernardino County Board of Supervisors, and you talk about challenges, the first thing that came out from my opponent was that I was a casino boss, that I was involved with some type of organized crime, and could an Indian from the Seminole Indian Reservation, a sovereign nation, truly represent and run for office in the county of San Bernardino, basically being accused of serving two masters. And we came back, we hit back hard. It became more of an educational campaign on, yes, Native Americans, California Indian people could run for office in the state of California and the United States. And so we had to go on a whole educational component, getting away from the typical political campaign. We had to bring up 1924, the Indian Citizenship Act, but we also had to bring up that not every state was moving forward and allowing Indian people to vote, right, up until the 60s. So it became more of an educational campaign. However, we did have the strong support of our local community, our areas. So we moved forward in that campaign. And I remember they were trying to intimidate me by saying that our Form 700, we're going to have to show how much income we have and all these different things. Well, you know what? I filed my Form 700, I moved forward, and I beat the incumbent, and I sat there as the County Board of Supervisor here in San Bernardino County and moved forward into CSAC, learning all those issues that are important. And I chaired one of the Urban Land and Transportation Committee for CSAC itself, and ultimately chaired the County Board of Supervisors. And there was a horrific event that happened in San Bernardino County. It was a December 2nd terrorist attack where I was the chairman of the board. And we handled that incident. We worked with our local law enforcement. We worked with the DA. We worked with them to show that we could actually manage the issues that were coming forward to us, breaking down a lot of those stereotypes that once a Native American gets elected, they're going to go after all these different things. They're not going to know how to be able to represent the community. We broke those stereotypes down because we moved forward and we brought closure to that specific event and others on the County Board of Supervisors. Challenges are tough. Challenges of one, running for office. When you decide to run for office, make sure it's the passion that's inside of you. For me, the educational component has always been a passion of mine. I went back to education, attained my associate's degree, my bachelor's of science degree, and my master's in business administration. And so I moved within the community college to increase online courses. On the County Board of Supervisors, was there to make sure that we had public safety and businesses were safe moving forward, as well as standing up for the employees that were there making up the workforce. And at the state assembly, running for state assembly and ultimately being elected and reelected here in the Assembly District 40, we challenge the issues that are in front of us for our community. We make sure that homelessness is number one. As county supervisor, I moved forward on a task force for our homeless youth task force. Move that forward, take that same mentality to the state, working with our mental health components. Suicide has always been high in our community. But when you look at our community as a whole, suicide has always been there. But yet on Native American tribal reservations and Native American people, the statistics go higher. So we move forward on a bill creating, for the first time in the history of the state of California, an office on suicide prevention, which the governor signed that bill into law. And sitting for a long time on the Native American Heritage Commission from 2011 to 2018, seeing how disregard for Native American people when you would go after the repatriation of the remains of our ancestors that are still being held at many institutions here in the state of California, and blatant disregard in front of the commission, in front of other places for the Native Americans' voice. So directors, museum directors, anthropologists, all those archaeologists had a stronger voice than our people. So I moved forward on one of my first bills, AB 275, to start to balance that equation out. We ultimately became a 2-year bill, and we got that signed by the governor this last cycle, creating a pathway now for those remains to be able to get back to the rightful owners, the tribal people, to conduct a reburial. That takes a lot of work. And you mentioned the voting rights. It wasn't until into the 60s where a lot of the suppression was starting to erode in Indian country, but it's not all the way gone. We still have areas where people have to drive 3 to 4 hours just to get to the supermarket. And so how are we going to make sure their vote is being counted? So I moved forward on another bill, AB 2314, that worked with the Secretary of State to create a task force and to look at on what and how we can move forward and better equip tribal nations to be able to get that vote out. And that bill was also signed into law by Governor Newsom. There's several bills that we moved forward in that the governor did sign. This governor has been really open and apologetic on the state of California for genocide and atrocities that have taken place towards the California Indian people. These bills that we introduce start to pave the way, doesn't solve the problem, but starts to pave the way for the advocacy and education in the state legislature with a lot of the other legislators to understand that the Indian people, not only here in the state of California, but across the nation, are far more than just gaming. We're far more than gaming. Our culture makes us who we are. Our standing up for one another in all these areas. Well, we know our ancestors in the state of California are still in archives in the UC system, over 500,000. I think that's something that we could all rally around to make sure those remains get back into the rightful owners of the tribal people to conduct reburials. It's a journey that if those that are out there listening, or the Brown Bag series that's here, that are interested in getting engaged in the political arena, we need more California Indian people, more Native Americans engaged at all levels in the state of California, from your local jurisdictions to your county, to your state, and to the federal areas. There's 5 of us that are out here now elected. We need more. We need more people elected to be able to be that voice here in the state of California.
Assembly member, I just want to say that all of your words are so strong and powerful and inspirational. And I've heard you talk about the need for more Native elected officials a few times. And every time I'm like, oh my gosh, am I supposed to run? Like, like it's motivating, right? Because we do need people fighting at all levels. And, you know, I also, you know, in working just around voter registration and voter education, voter engagement, we often hear things like, well, it doesn't really make a difference. It doesn't matter. And I'm so happy this is being recorded, because I want to play this for our young people to say, look at all of the things that have been able to be pushed through because we have a California Native in the state assembly, and that would not have otherwise, or would have taken much longer. So I think, you know, your leadership is just such a testament to how false that is about how it doesn't matter and it doesn't make a difference. You have just passed forward so much legislation on behalf of Native peoples in California that's been good for our communities. So thank you so much for your leadership and your work. And yes, I would love to bring Supervisor Crandall into the conversation as well. And if you can also share the same, what has been your journey and your experience as becoming an elected supervisor in your county?
Well, first off, I know that Assemblyman Ramos has paved the way for that. And, you know, I don't know how to follow that up. That was just some really, it motivated me to hear that as well. So a lot of those initiatives, you know, I know we're in tune with in Lake County, especially when it comes to the remains of our people. And Christina, you know, I always want to give her kudos for getting Governor Brown to come to the Roundhouse in my district back in 2018. And I want to thank you as well for hosting this. My name's Eddie Crandall. I go by EJ Crandall, and I am District 3 Supervisor in Lake County. I am from Robinson Rancheria, which is known before as the Nojaba. And the town that I live in is called Lucerne, which used to be called Eshigo. I know all the historical names for each town in my district. We have 3 federally recognized tribes in my district. There's Upper Lake Habematalo, Robinson, and the Elam Indian Colony. Mm-hmm. And I'll have to say, when I ran for office, one of the I barely won by like 75 votes, maybe 72 to 75 votes. And I know that those are Native American votes that probably never voted before in elections. So I think that's a great thing. I also try to do my best to ensure people know about the voting system, as they do still feel as if their vote doesn't matter, or they don't want to vote on that because it doesn't affect them. And I tell them it does affect them. And I try to give those type of encouragements as well. When I decided to run in 2018, I had previously had been the chair of Robinson. I started that in 2015. I used to be on the tribal council 2006 and 7. I was a member at large during that time frame. We went through some issues internally with the tribe. Once I learned all of those internal issues, because I won as a chair in 2008 of Robinson Rancheria, but the election went a different way. It's kind of a really microcosm of what's happening in the United States with the president right now. I'm telling you, the chair at that time didn't want to leave and was working every type of initiative to try and keep her seat as I beat her out as an incumbent. And in fact, it ended up working out. But had I not learned those lessons, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. So when 2015 or 14 took place, a group of people had worked with me to become the chair of the tribe again, and we worked and did some great things. And we paid off $10 million in debt for the tribe, et cetera, things like that. But in doing so, the District 3 supervisor at the time, Jim Steele, had appointed me as his planning commissioner. And I didn't know what that was at the time, but I knew that I could do it because he showed me what it took. And I watched some of the meetings and looked into what was going on. And sure enough, 2018 comes around and he's still running, but he's like, you should, not him, but some other people, you should put your name in just to get your name out there. You may not win, but hey, and I seen that also from a colleague of mine from the Elam Indian Colony, Jim Brown. He had ran in 2014. So I figured, yeah, I'll put my name in. Well, Jim didn't run. So I ended up running against another person. So he retired, and that's how I ended up winning that position. And, the hardest thing about that campaign, I would say, is asking for money. You're not used to that in tribal elections. In tribal elections, you just kind of go out there, throw your name on there, talk to different families, get the issues at hand. And also, we're tribes are very young in the mindset of governing the way that we do, because it's kind of based on the colonial, style of it. And so, we don't spend money on campaigns. We don't, there's just a lot of different intricacies that don't take place, but they're very similar and they're very grassroots. But with the campaign for the county, he was going to different places, talking to people. But one thing I learned in working with my tribe is our people are still suffering from different things like, post-traumatic stress, genocidal affliction, things like that. And so you have a lot of dysfunction in tribes and whatnot. But they're all the same issues, and the humans are very similar. So in Lake County, we're one of the poorest counties, and in dealing with people in my community, it's like dealing with tribal members that have had hard times in their lives. And so I've been in tune with some of these people because I've grown up here at Robinson Rancheria since I was a kid. I grew up, like Assemblyman Ramos said, impoverished before gaming took place. And so living poor, understanding those type of, empirical lifestyle, deals. For example, PSPS, when people are like really outraged about the PSPS by PG&E, we're like, okay, that's the summer of our childhood. So we're without power. We can figure that out. And a lot of natives are prepared. And, we do our best to get everyone ready. But, it's getting the local folks on board with that as well. But So asking for money, getting out there is not a problem. Talking with people, that's not. I went to high school with a lot of the folks around here. I think one of the challenges too is that, the county that I'm in is primarily Democratic. My position is a nonpartisan position, and I have a decline to state by my name because I serve both. I try to serve the issues and not concentrate on the actual partisan side of things. But it's very difficult because with the climate today and the political realm, it's so divided, and anything you vote on is always going to be kind of projected out by different voters. You get threatened that you're going to be recalled, and you get called Biden or undercover Trump or whatever. But hey, you got to get tough, and you do get tough when you're in the tribe because you have family members saying mean things. You can handle anything. So that, and they'll dig up your past. During my 2018 election, my grandfather passed away right during right before the primaries, and I won in the primaries, thank goodness. Because it was a one-on-one, but they had found something in my past and tried to bring it out. And had I not had experience, and had I not been guided by my cultural ways and by my ancestors and my grandfather, and I might have answered in a carnal way that wouldn't have been unbecoming as an elected official. Instead, I took the high road, dealt with it, and it worked out really more in my favor. It still happens. There's always people out there, entities of the media that or of the community that want to find ways to kind of take the Jenga so that hopefully you'll fall as a candidate so they can get their liked candidate in there. But, you just got to be on top of it, and you have to do your work. You have to get out there and find, get the issues going. And, I know with mine, I'm always looking at it from a town perspective, just like I thought of with the tribe in family perspective. So I knew there was family members that lived in the Bay Area or in Butte County or whatever. I went and attacked those issues proactively. Same here. I just go to my communities where the issues are and try to get on top of them regardless, and to give them answers. And even if they're not good answers that they don't want, at least they're an answer that has at least the truth in it. And so they feel represented even though they're not getting what they want. And then I educate them, especially when it came to this election. People were upset. They're saying, oh, we don't think our votes are counted. There's this and that going. We have this ballot tracks thing that's not being posted. And I went up and talked to the Register of Voters and said, hey, what's going on? I just I want to, find out, I know people are asking about their ballots. And they showed me. We have a small office that we've had for years. We also only have 4 people to go through all of these that have been mailed in or collected at the ballot areas. So we still have time to do that, but a lot of time to do that. We still need that time to do it, but also we need to count. We have a state mandate to get the count first. So, I went on and did something online for Facebook to let people know that their vote will be counted. And there's just trying to give those type of empirical evidence to them to show too that I've talked to their register of voters. And then not to mention doing and conducting tribal elections. That's very brick and mortar when it comes to it. It's like tally votes, things like that. So, but knowing the sense of actually the sensitivity of an election really gets, especially in tribes, because there's always going to be a projection, or if someone loses, or if there's an appeal. And so I'm able to kind of know what they're dealing with in that forum. So try to give my best knowledge to that. My identity as a Native American really played a good part in my community, because a lot of folks, one, being with the tribe and doing things in the community. I was a baseball coach for the high school, and I played at the high school there, and served in the military. So that all of that really kind of contributed to a good prerequisite for being an elected official. Mo could also, he won in District 1. And so he's doing a great job. So they kind of seen, well, hey, this might be a good thing, but then there's always the downside to it. People saying, the Indians are taking over. You really only have what I want to say, like 1,000 members in the county, but there's 65,000 other members. So you're going to have to do more than, there's always just the down talk of that stuff, but that's going to always be there. And there's just folks that really don't like change. They're used to the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and they wanted it to stay that way for so long, but they have to, sometimes you have to eat crow and realize that we're all people from this wonderful state, country, everything like that. And our people were here since time immemorial. And so once I got into my position, it was just mainly learning a lot more. I'm part of the RCRC committee, rural counties representing California. I go to the CSAC. I've been to some of those. I'm working on the CSAC credentialing program. And I just try to listen to folks and do my best in learning about what I'm dealing with. I've been able to bring Indigenous Peoples Day to Lake County, because before they still called it Columbus Day. I know that it caused some, there's some people here that are really wasn't happy with. They're like, isn't there more better things to do than do this? And it just, you wouldn't believe that this day and age we would have those issues. So I do things like, also I'm working with the Spring Valley. There's a town called Spring Valley, which used to be called Lucille, but there's people who live out there. They have a CSA, which is a community service area district, and they're trying. They have a little group that votes each month and talks about the problems with their roads and their water. And so their roads are really underserved, and our county is really working on some of the SB1 funds, trying to get those projects done. And so CSA 2 Spring Valley is kind of on the back burner. Plus, they don't have enough to compete with prevailing wage. So I've been trying to talk with Round Valley, the tribe, who has an actual roads program, trying to link those together and get some kind of new things going to get them served, and also get Round Valley some work, because if they could get a couple of those under their belt, they might become a more sought out industry for roads, things like that. In Lucerne, one of the things I ran on was economic development in the county. And because of my experience with the casino, I also served a brief time as a GM, but there's also some of those type of different projected issues out there, saying that I'm friends with the local weed growers, and that's what they get down and say it that way, and that we're going to bully the county, and I have connections that way, and I don't. Our tribe is one of the main tribes that did not want to get into the cultivation and cannabis industry, but people like to say things, and so that's just what happens. But back to the economic development side of things, we worked on this one in the heart of my district. There's a place called Lucerne, of course, where I live, Shigum, but they have a harbor, and it's really filled with soot and different shrubbery that's in the water. Needs to be dredged, and so we've been trying to raise money, and the previous supervisor had a hard time getting that funding for whatever reason, and I had some folks come in, and it ended up working out. We now have $350,000 to do the work. We're hoping that with this type of funding, we can get that area dredged. People that can come there in boats rather than driving everywhere. They can come on boats and come into the town, to the restaurants, things of that nature. Because the scenic route of Highway 20 is just one that everybody loves, because it's right by the water. It's beautiful. There's places to stop. So we're trying to reinvigorate that area and get people to come, because that's what our county is. It's a tourist county. And so so far that's kind of the things I've been working on. My vision for the future is I just want to do better at my job for now before thinking about anything else. So
thank you so much for sharing your journey, as well as all of the important governance work that you've done since you've been in your position. I am so happy to hear about how you're working in a rural community as well. I think I'm in an urban community setting, so I know the issues of this urban reality, but I think the population of Native peoples in California is very interesting, because we have double the rate of the next racial group as far as our rural experience is concerned. And yet we also have a highly urbanized population. So you kind of have both of those experiences. So it's so great to hear all the incredible work that you're doing. I maybe just one more question before we open it up for questions from our participants. So the name of this talk is Getting Your Name on the Ballot. So, we're truly trying to demystify and share with people, what is the process to actually get your name on the ballot? And even before you start to file the paperwork, as people are considering running, in the next cycle or a few cycles out, like, what is your advice for Native peoples that want to actually consider running for office? What would you like to share with them that was really critical in your own experiences? Oh, you're muted.
Would you like me to go first, or
Yes,
Supervisor?
that would be great.
I think getting your name on the ballot, I mean, a lot of this for Indian people, myself, growing up on the reservation, could seem intimidating. And so making that decision first, right, that you're going to do it, and nothing's going to deter you, going down to the register of voters and finding out, you want to run for an office, then you get all this paperwork that you got to fill out, right? Some people shy away from that, not just Indian people, but people in general from the community. They get the stack of papers and they disengage, right? So being able to move forward. So being able to then get the paperwork for the office you're seeking, and then putting your name down, right? Your title, your name, where you live, make sure you qualify for it. And then in some cases, you have to go out and get signatures of people, right? People, constituents that would sign a paper for you to be able to run. And then you have to turn that in also. So it's a process before you could even get on the ballot. And then on the ballot, you have your name, and then it'll say title, designation, whether it's small business owner, whether it's assembly member, whether it's, whatever it is, your title that you're going to move forward in. Then comes the passion. So a lot of that, you have to have the passion, the will to make sure you're going to see it all the way through. That's making you move forward in that step in general. I remember first filing for the community college board of trustees. Originally, there was a vacancy on the board. There was a member that resigned. So I went for that vacancy. It came down between me and another gentleman named Bob Piercy. The board elected Bob Piercy to fill that spot. So I felt like, man, that was my first deal going out there, right? And I had to come back to the reservation, and people, some were saying, see, I told you, what were you thinking, type deal. And I'm like, man, forget that. So then what I did, I opened up an account and I started running for that position, I think at least 18 months before the actual election itself, allowing me to learn more about the position, being able to raise money, being able to be in the community, right? And being able to learn. I ended up winning that race on the community college board of trustees. So not only is it getting your name on the ballot, it's a timing issue of when. Some political consultants will say, wait till the last minute. And some will say at least a year ahead of time. For me, my first race for the community college, I went out there at least 18 months before. And then again for the county board of supervisors, at least another 18 months ahead of time to raise money, to get the topics down. But I can't say enough about your will and your desire to move forward, to overcome all those obstacles. And Supervisor was alluding to those as far as people saying that now he's with a certain industry and all these things. They'll come at you. They'll come at you. One, they'll attack you for your Indian culture, right? And if they can't get you there, they're going to come after your money. They're going to come after things that they'll try to bring up, like controversy. So one of the things that we've been able to do is be able to run some information against myself, right? So being able to find out what is in my past, if someone looks at it, and be ready to counter that, as well as doing opposition research on your opponent, right? So opposition research on your opponent, but make sure you're doing opposition research on yourself so you know what could come your way. And then you just start moving forward, get those topics moving, and identifying at least 2 to 3 topics that are important in the race that you're running in, to make sure you continue to tackle those issues over and over and over until that becomes the why you're running, right? People will ask those things.
So helpful. Supervisor Crandall?
Yes, getting those signatures, that's a big deal because it's you inherently have to pay. I think it's so for supervisor, it's 10% of what your salary would be in the case that you do win. And so if you get those signatures, it could, in essence, it could knock off that price. But at the same time, you still have to pay for things like I got my announcement put in Spanish to help, because I know we have a lot of folks here that are Hispanic. To me, I consider Hispanics Native Americans because they're just mixed with Spaniards, as like myself, my indigenous side, my great grandfather is mixed with Irish. So it's no difference. We just have a different language that we those folks are from, South America that are indigenous tribes. But for me, I embrace that side of culture. and I consider them a big part of our community here in California. So it's doing those things. I think Assemblyman hit a lot of those, but it really is a big thing to get your past ready just in case. And I tried to take the approach. I didn't want to go on the attack on my opponent. My opponent claimed that she wasn't a part of it. I have a feeling I know who really was, but either way, you just kind of got to get past it. And when you do, you'll notice the community really, especially some of your hardest critics, if they see the way you responded and it's in a positive way, matter of fact way, and you handle it with dignity and whatnot, then you'll gain their respect. So it's just that, being confident, being willing to go the extra route, go to different areas, meet people you've never talked to before, engage, even if the person's going to be negative and be critical of you and all of the other things that come along with it. But you have to engage them because you kind of need that mindset. I watch and listen to the opposition in different areas when it comes to initiatives on the ballot, because I like to know what each side is thinking, and it gets me the idea. Because I really consider myself, I don't like to say this like we're a parent, but I like to be the parent in the room, and I don't like to really take a side on things. I'd rather look at both and see how we can get some sort of consensus, because that's how our ancestors were leaders, consensus builders. And so I go off of that to try to be a consensus builder rather than anything. So it not only that, but just knowing the process and keeping people at bay when they feel like there's cheating or whatever. Understanding too, one thing I did not understand was that there was still 30 days afterwards that needed to take account. So the night of, we're like, okay, I won. And they're like, no, you didn't win yet. There's still some votes that could be counted. So you got to be ready. And that's another thing you got to be ready for. So.
Especially in this pandemic where vote by mail was so emphasized and utilized. So thank you. One more quick question. Were there any organizations or helpers? Were there people or any kinds of, resources that you'd recommend for people to consider as they're, going through this process? Or were you all just pretty much did it on your own with your own individual networks?
I think one of the things for me was being able early on, even before I ran for the community college board of trustees with the tribal positions that I've had, business committee, gaming commissioner, treasurer, ultimately chairman, during a time where we needed the community members to come out and stand with us for the right to game and the protests, those things. We ended up, myself and my chairman at the time, Henry Duro, we would go down to a local restaurant in San Bernardino called Meatless Cafe. And they would have a Kiwanis meeting there early in the morning. So, I asked the chairman, I said, let's go down there, right? Because we need to get people to come and help. So we went down there, and lo and behold, we were serving coffee to people, right, as through the meeting. And we ended up becoming members of that. And so then getting involved with those kind of clubs, Kiwanis, Rotary Club, some of those, right? Getting out there and understanding what's going on in the community, right? Building a network of people in the community itself. So when you do decide to run, right, that you already made some type of networking there. Now, for me, growing up on the Samoa Indian Reservation, it was really tough. It was tough for us to go outside of, I guess, the comfort zone, right? We didn't have a Kiwanis or a Rotary Club on the reservation, right? So we go down there just to see what it's about. And right away, we had to serve coffee. And I'm like, why are we serving people, right? I mean, but that's the role of the job that we have. Even as cultural people, once we think about it, we serve others, right? It's not about us. We serve our community. We serve those, right, with what it is that we do. So getting used to that type of atmosphere, right? And making sure that you are forming some type of friendships along the way during those things. So networking in the community that you plan to serve for.
Thank you. Thank you both. We have a few minutes left, and I wanted to make space for our participants to also ask questions that they might be holding. So any questions from the participants?
I have one
chat.
coming through chat. And so this is from Vice Chair Peterson from Middletown, but she wanted to know, and you might know this from your perspective, Chrissy, if there are any up and comers that will be running for office that you know of.
Well, we did have an
for you to talk about the organizations that you have stood up.
Absolutely. So we did have a young Native and Latina woman. She ran for state senate in San Francisco, Jackie Fielder. Really, I don't think that many people thought that she had a chance when she first filed, and she quickly gained support from mass community mobilization. She was very active in the fight around Standing Rock and the fight around divestments in fossil fuel industries and banking. And she had a lot of community support and really gave her opponent, who was an incumbent, a real strong race. You know, we hope to see that she will continue. So Assemblymember Ramos, you shared the experience of going out on your first time and that not happening. And we hear that across the country, where somebody will, you know, go for a seat, doesn't win. And then you see some people saying, I'm out, I don't like politics, that was too hard. And you see some people that make the other decision. They're resolute, I'm gonna run the next time. So we really hope Jackie Fielder runs again, because she did have so much. She was able to almost match dollar for dollar in fundraising of what her you know, opponent raised. She's so young. I think she has such a bright future. So we really do hope to see that she runs again. But as Assemblymember Ramos shared, you know, we need dozens and dozens and dozens. We need a lot of people to run, and also to just be resolute in the fact that you may not win that first time out, but you get that experience, you get to build a team, you get to build a donor base, you get to know community, and you get name recognition. So maybe the next time you run, it's going to be an easier ride, or there might be another position that is open. So, you know, Wendy Carrillo, for example, ran in my local district for Congress, and she didn't win, but she got all that experience, name recognition, exposure. And then when the assembly position opened in our district, she ran and she won quite easily. So we also have to think about, you know, the long game, and the fact that these political systems are new to us. So we need to give ourselves a break in learning how they work, and building relationships, and also in creating organizations and pathways to support one another to go through that. You know, the Native Power Pack that I had talked about is very brand new. Myself and Morningstar Gali and Anna Theachino co-founded it. We started about 3 months before the election, trying to get money, trying to get it established, getting a treasurer, figuring out, you know, legal compliance. And with all of the different, you know, red tape that happened, we only were able to get it up like in the last 3 weeks of the election. So, you know, in that we learned so much. We did come behind and try to support Jackie Fielder's campaign. We reached 50,000 voters in her district. But, you know, even though she didn't win, I still feel like she did win, because, you know, she was able to really raise the issues. She was able to, you know, get a lot of exposure about who she is and her leadership. She had the whole community behind her. And the same that I see the PAC is that, you know, we didn't win that first race that we tried, but we learned how a PAC works. We learned the reporting systems, you know, and so next time when other Native candidates are running in the state, now we have an apparatus to support that candidate. And we hope that we're not the only one. We think that there should be multiple PACs that get established on behalf of Native candidates. So I really see that, you know, it's kind of a whole learning process. The last thing that I'll share is that, we're very interested in pulling together candidate training and campaign manager training, and also training around data and digital. So there's a whole infrastructure in campaigns. So it's not that we only want to be Native candidates, although we do need and very much want that, but we really want to create the pathway so that there's a lot of support for Native candidates once they decide to run.
Well, if my career goes a different route, I would be glad to help people get elected in their in their plights, because I know what it takes. And I had a really great mentor. My uncle Kyle Crandall, he ran for different positions in the Bay Area and down in San Bernardino, and then also Olga Martin Steele, who helped me with my campaign and taught me like everything. And so I have a passion for that as well. Yeah.
Wonderful.
If there are participant questions, feel free to put them in the chat or to unmute your line now.
Yes, Christina, I have a question. First of all, my name is Scott Lathrop, and I live in San Luis Obispo, California. Member of a local tribe, and recently ran for San Luis Port Harbor District. So I wish this presentation would have happened about 6 months ago. It was a lot of good information. It would have helped out a lot. But just recently, of course, in our county, we will be, the governor will be appointing a new supervisor. And I have thrown my application into that process. And I was wondering if anybody would have any good recommendations on having additional input to the governor, or how I can influence or provide information, things of that nature, because it's just a little bit different process. It very much akin to Assemblyman Ramos's experience with the local school board, I want to say college board. But again, this is a position that I think is really important to our local tribe, simply because Diablo Canyon is in the district, and there's an opportunity going forward as far as gaining back our homelands. And I think the position is going to play a pivotal part, and it's critical, in my belief, to have a Native American sitting in that seat. So I'm looking for support in ways that I could possibly influence that appointment.
I think one of the things that we could align that to is when we went for the appointment for the State Board of Education, which ultimately Governor Brown did appoint me to the State Board of Education in 2011. There was a different application that had to go through, but you had to get letters from people, right, in the community that really stood a lot, right, because now you have the local community saying that they're supporting you for that appointment that's there. I think being genuine on why you want that position, the passion that's driving you even to bring this up on this Zoom, right? There has to be underlying issues within yourself of why you feel so strong about going after this appointment. And I believe it, you mentioned your ancestral lands that are there and protection of those. Those are noble areas that I believe that if you put them down and sent them to someone in the administration, that they would truly understand that voice that has been vacant from that Board of Supervisors that you could bring to the table, but also being able to bring to the table knowledge on economics, knowledge on business, knowledge on public safety, knowledge on what's important for the county itself. Meanwhile, allowing you to be able to tackle these issues as a Native American person.
Great, thank you. Great advice.
So we are at time. If there are other questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat now and we can follow up. We can also take questions at the Tribal Affairs email at info.tribalaffairs@gov.ca.gov. And I think I just want to wrap this conversation up by thanking our panelists. Thank you so much for taking the time during Native American Heritage Month. So happy Native American Heritage Month. And Assemblymember Ramos does have a very nice post that he did yesterday. So I encourage you all to take a look at that from the Select Committee on Native American Affairs. And I just wanted to finish on that where, having people in these positions is how we get, select committees on Native American affairs. It's how we get Pomo statues in the square in Lake County, you know, and regardless, I think something that Chrissy mentioned, you know, it's not just the benefit of going through the process for the individual and the name recognition. Going through the process of being a viable candidate that threatens the status quo actually has the effect of changing the status quo. I just got an email right now from someone from the assembly asking how to incorporate land acknowledgements into all of the assembly members' openings. So things change because people understand that, you know, that we're still here and that we matter and that these issues are important to us and that we are a valued constituency. And so, you know, all of it matters. It all creates change. And I just want to thank you all for being you, standing up for the struggle. I know that you guys are skimming the surface because we need to trick more people into running for office, but really appreciate your being in these spaces and doing all the work that you do. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And then just to wrap, this will be recorded and I'll post it and I'll share it with presenters if they want to link it out somewhere or live stream it at another time themselves. So thanks all and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Enjoy.
you. Bye-bye.
Happy Native American Heritage Month.
There you go.